I want to make sure that we cover this particular topic of mental health and well-being inside of law enforcement. And, you know, over the years, that topic keeps coming up to the point where I personally feel and professionally feel that mental health is some low-hanging fruit where community residents and law enforcement could actually discover quite a bit of common ground as it relates to we agree here that something needs to be done, and we are all for working with you to fix this issue because mental health and well-being is such a pervasive problem in our greatest society that we have ignored for many years how big an issue it has been inside of the law enforcement community. So you talk to me about a callous heart. You talk to me about the darkness, heart, mind, darkness of the profession, dealing with dark issues, dealing with dark people. Talk to me about the mental health challenges inside of law enforcement and what is and isn't being done to address that issue.
I came from the military, as we've covered throughout this conversation, knowing that I had my own personal mental health challenges, as in I had learned how to live what I consider to be the normal life with holding on to trauma. I was able to go directly into law enforcement without that ever being really looked at.
In an official capacity.
In an official capacity. I was given a psychological test, but I was well-versed and understood mental health. I knew what to say and how to get through it. So there was nothing that revealed any type of mental health problem. So I went directly into law enforcement coming out of a very traumatic time in my previous 8 years. So I carried what I was holding on to in the military, and I carried it directly into law enforcement.
On the federal level.
On a federal level. And so that the psychological exam was the only thing that was ever examined, and that was a written test. So as long as I was able to answer the questions correctly, I was able to move on in my application process. So I began my career in law enforcement, and I began to experience even more trauma. But your adrenaline is still going. It's the way that our natural way our body responds to anything that could be dangerous. Our bodies are just greatly created in which it tries to protect us from harm. And so we get this burst or this just a burst of adrenaline that is there to help you. It's the fight or flight syndrome. It's either you freeze or you run and fight, but it's that extra chemical release of that hormonal chemical that's giving you that extra strength to be able to do what you need to do to stay alive. There's been examples of mothers, lifting up cars if, their child is caught up underneath because of this adrenaline rush. But anytime somebody's left with long periods of time of adrenaline, then it can become brain damaging, and it can also lead to trauma that is now will remain inside of the brain, and that's what we consider to be that leading to post-traumatic stress. Anytime you're in a traumatic situation and you don't necessarily want to deal with it because you still have responsibilities to get through, so you really just begin to isolate or segregate those feelings and emotions, the fears that you're actually experiencing, because they're real life fears. You just put them back in the backside of your brain. It's really just trauma's caught within the amygdala of the brain, and it's not processing that situation. Well, having that inside of my brain and knowing that was there, I moved into a successful career into law enforcement and began really thriving in my career, but that had not been handled. And like I said, the only examination I ever had was a written test that proved that I was psychologically fit to continue my career now in law enforcement, and so I did. But basically, on every operation that we would go out to, my adrenaline would go up as high as it could go, and I began to get used to this adrenaline rush, and it almost became a necessity. It almost became like an addiction. And so you may have heard of adrenaline junkies that go and risk their lives and bungee jump and do all these extreme sports in pursuit of that adrenaline rush. Well, in law enforcement, it could be that way as well. And so many law enforcement officers get into this career path because they know that it could be a career that could be rewarding or exciting because it is one that will inspire that adrenaline to be released into the body. And if you're one that's an adrenaline junkie or one that that feels comfortable functioning with high levels of adrenaline, then it's a great career for you, because you could be sitting somewhere and all of a sudden you get a call and there's 211 in progress. Your heart starts pounding. You hit the gas as hard as you can and you go, and your adrenaline's pumping. So when you show up to the scene, that adrenaline's still going, and that adrenaline is meant to be able to help you fight your way out of this problem, or at least to give you the strength to be able to survive. And so prolonged periods of time of this adrenaline, then it could become very damaging to the brain. And continuing to function with that type of brain damage then can cause people to react in ways that a regular person would normally not react. You may become very impulsive. You may be very quick to anger. You may not be able to control or regulate your emotions in the way that you would normally do it, or another person may normally be able to handle their emotions. So you could see how somebody gets a call to respond to a domestic violence. Their heart is pumping. They want to stay alive, just like everybody does. And all of a sudden, you're triggered by the violence that is happening. Or if in the case of, let's say, Breonna Taylor, where the raid that was botched and just handled incorrectly. But I put myself in the shoes of those officers showing up on that scene, and they crash the door and a gunshot goes off. Well, their adrenaline is now going through the roof, so they're ready to respond according to many of the past situations that they've experienced, or much of that trauma that you've been carrying for so long. So if I put myself in those shoes, and I feel that many law enforcement officers came from many different experiences that I have. Many law enforcement officers come in from the military. There's a large
About a quarter
percentage,
of them, yeah.
and as well as in the federal side, many federal agents come from a former law enforcement experience. So they're carrying untreated trauma. Being in law enforcement, it was unspoken no, as in do not go see the psych doctor, because they'll take away your gun and you'll get put in some form of administrative position if you're ever considered to be unfit psychologically, mentally. So it was a unspoken rule that everybody knew, and I actually heard it verbally from several people. They said, when you go see the shrink or the psych doctor, don't tell them really how you feel, because they'll take away your gun, and that almost feels like a loss of identity. If I'm well trained and my duty is to carry my weapon in support of my brotherhood, or my family and my race of blue, and now I'm sitting at a desk, it's as if I let my family down.